Hey, how's it going out there?
Today we're going to be talking about some special cards that are very annoying to play against in EDH.
Yeah, basically these cards are douchebag cards. A card in and of itself, probably not that big of a deal, but if you use it and it like pretty much pisses everybody off, it can kind of fall into the douchebag category. One of the first things we want to talk about was Sundering Titan. Some people love this card, like frankly I hate it. Not a fan of land destruction. Like, what do you think about this one?
I like it when it's in my deck. Don't like to see it in my opponent's deck.
Yeah, you can really screw people over, and if you use this in a really evil way, you can set one player back so far they can't even recover. I guess we're looking at like really annoying artifacts, like we might as well talk about Mindslaver.
I love Mindslaver. It's so much fun.
You love Mindslaver?
Yes.
I don't know about Mindslaver. Like, this is a pretty annoying card. Like, it makes some cards in EDH almost unplayable, like Necropotence. If you get it Mindslavered when you have a Necropotence, your opponent can take your turn and just make you pay like all of your life. So that's pretty lame. The other thing that's lame about this card, and in general, is when people use this with Academy Ruins and just recur it over and over again. That's kind of a tired act. Not very thrilled with that.
Alright, so maybe not a fan of Mindslaver.
Generally, red cards aren't really all that great in EDH, in my opinion. This is a card, though, that can be pretty annoying and get out of hand pretty quick. It's funny enough, like, it's not very good and constructed. I don't think there's ever been a major deck built around it. But Vicious Shadows, like whenever a creature gets into the graveyard, it starts doing a whole bunch of damage. And I've known some folks that play this with a bunch of tokens, and it's pretty annoying. What do you think about it?
Definitely annoying.
Alright, we'll add that one to the DB list. So we're talking about annoying red cards. Let's take a look at 3 of the, more disdainful red cards that somebody could pick.
So we've got Jockle Hops, bury all artifacts, creatures, and lands.
Man,
all of them.
Anything that buries lands, not a big fan of that.
What about Boil? Destroy all islands? That could do a number on Azami.
Well, it definitely can hold certain things in check, and in and of itself, I don't think this is the worst thing in the world. But if people are just randomly throwing this in the first deck that they build and go into an unknown environment, it's pretty hateful against blue players. The last card that we have here is probably my least favorite of all. I generally kind of have a rule that if folks are going to pay, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 mana for something, I wouldn't complain too much because that's kind of hard to pull off. But Obliterate can't be countered, so there's not really a lot of things that hold it in check. And it destroys all artifacts, creatures, lands, and it can't be regenerated. So I guess,
for that.
Yeah, boo for that. If you have a really nice strategy that's kind of built in around land destruction, like you're suspending some things and you're going to use this a win condition, I can see an argument for these cards. But if you're just throwing these things in and you just reset the game and make it take forever, it's pretty tedious, not very fun, and I'm pretty much going to vote these cards go on the DB list. You have enough bad people that you play with that pair this with Pact of Negation, all the packs, the red and white pact, which people barely even know what they do, much less have the ability to pay for them, and you start getting out of control with some instant wins that are pretty devious. The other thing that happens with Hive Mind is there are some cards that can be cast with this that are just like kind of extraneous, like Warp World, and if you're playing with 5 people and everybody has to copy Warp World, that's fun 1 or 2 times, but after resolving the 7th version of that card, like it can get a little bit old. So I think this card you really have to think about. It's kind of like one of those things with great power, there's great responsibility.
So here's Ristic Study. Looks like just some card draw. What's so bad about that?
Card draw and blue, they kind of go together. The problem becomes this card gets kind of out of hand and can usually sway games. I think that this is probably one of the more threatening cards in EDH. I usually play this if I'm playing blue, so I don't want to be too hypocritical. But basically, if we check the text box on this thing, it's whenever another opponent plays a spell, you can draw a card unless they pay 1. 1 or 2 people might be smart enough to pay the 1 and keep somebody off their draw, but most of the time at a table of 3, 4, 5, you can draw 3, 4 extra cards per turn, and it can give you quite an advantage that can become insurmountable.
Disciple of the Vault. He's a very interesting card. So whenever an artifact goes into a graveyard from play, you can make an opponent lose 1 life. Now, he is very critical in certain combos, such as with Shroom the Hegemon.
Yeah, there used to be a combo with Shroom where you would play Sculpting Still and have this guy out and just cycle a whole bunch of times using the legendary rule to kill Sculpting Still and bring it back. I mean, I'm sure you guys remember this card from the old Affinity decks. It's pretty ridiculous, and there's just a lot of things in and of itself. A little black 1-drop, not so bad, but all the abusive stuff that goes on with this guy, he's usually bad news. If you ever see somebody play this guy, you should kill him, and then you should never play with him again. Just kidding. You can play with them, but just hope they pull this out of their deck.
Contamination. This makes everybody's lands produce black instead of their normal land type.
Yeah, and EDH, basically what you end up with here is a card that can cause just about all the other decks to tap for colorless mana. That can be pretty annoying. Like, there was a whole deck built around Braids, the Black General Braids, and the little Cabal minion or whatever was pretty annoying because you could sack things off. Generally, your deck was made in a way where you could, like, generate some meaningless token, sack it off where everybody else is sacking lands. This has a really similar effect. I don't think it gets as much play, but basically, this card's pretty big contender for the DB list.
Luminarch Ascension.
Yeah, well, most people think that white cards are generally like a little bit underpowered. They have some pretty good removal, which I like. They have a lot of cool creatures, which are, you know, essential to the format and pretty fun. But this card, like every time I've played against it so far, it's been pretty annoying. It gets out of hand really fast. If you're playing multiplayer and this drops early, somebody can start cranking out those White Angels, and it's just not really amazing. The good news is it makes you a definite target to die.
Magister Sphinx.
Alright, this is like probably one of my top 2 most hated cards in EDH. This guy, he just plays the big cheats basically. There's not a lot of setup. You do pay 7, so at least there's some cost associated with it. But when he comes into play, you make a target player's life total 10, and in EDH, if you haven't taken any damage, you're usually looking at losing about 30 just to one silly flying Sphinx.
I have 3 words for you if your opponent drops Magister Sphinx. Reverse the sands.
Yeah, do something. Like, turn this effect back on them. Like, I usually play redirect effects, and if there's any way you can, like, willbender this guy back onto the DB that drops it, you should definitely do that.
Now, why would you have this poor little kitten up here?
The only problem is where I see this guy going in the future. I think he's going to be a pretty big problem once people start pairing this with blue. He's not legendary, and you could make like a ton of copies of this guy. You could have like Rite of Replication, you could be making copies with Clone. If you get enough life gain and a good blue deck going, you drop this guy and it's almost a lock for the win.
Soren Markov, the evil planeswalker.
Yeah, I'm going to call this guy as the #1 douchebag card in EDH.
Number 1, you heard it here.
Alright, here's the deal. You got to play 6 for the guy. So you're at 3 black. Alright, so there's somewhat of an investment, but black mixed with other colors is really, really popular in EDH, and I can see a bunch of dudes trying to drop this into their deck and being like, OMG, I am such a good player by dropping this guy on the field. Basically, you're looking at his -3 as being probably the most douchebag effect in all the game, dropping somebody's life total to 10, and you even get a blend in the Mindslaver for -7. I don't know, just this guy, he pretty much embodies everything that I hate about effects in EDH. He's dropping life totals, there's not really a good way to deal with them right off the bat. He doesn't take much of a setup, you just kind of run him out there, and then he plays Kingmaker by letting somebody adjust your life total. I played with this guy one time when he first came out. I used his effect and I felt awful inside. I hope that everybody that plays this card feels pretty awful inside, and because you're basically playing the #1 douchebag card in EDH right now.
I wouldn't feel awful. Use it, abuse it, win with it.
You should definitely feel awful.
Hate the game, not the player.
Alright, that's a wrap up. Leave your comments and opinions down in the section below. We can kind of debate this stuff. I don't think any of these cards should necessarily be banned, but I think there should be some pretty heavy consequences for players that play with them in terms of, everybody turning against them. Alright, Keep building those 100 card decks, and we'll keep making more stuff for you guys to talk about.